Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, your favorite Giants podcast. I'm your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike, the Cranky Fan, and we are back for our another first episode of a new season. It is officially the 2025 season. We have shut the doors on 2024, and this is our first episode back.
Farewell 2024.
Yeah, really. And every new season starts with assessing your roster. So that's where we're at. That's where we're parked for today. We're gonna park the car right on assessing the quarterback and stop there. That's probably going to eat up a decent enough chunk of time. So we figure that's a good place to start. Probably do either the entire offensive line next week, or if I don't know if we'll be able to do the entire offense.
Yeah, we'll just see how these things go.
Yeah. So it'll either be the entire offensive line or the entire offense.
Yeah, we got plenty of time between now and the draft. We have lots to talk about.
Right.
And we'll just play by ear and see how it goes.
So how we're going to kind of do this is we're going to kind of just take a look at the Giants roster, sort of position by position, and just sort of make an assessment of what the current guys under the roster are, what their contract situation sort of is, so where the Giants are at these positions, and me and Crank's assessment of that position and how we would address it in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
Quarterback room, not great.
It's story 1, 2, and 3 of this offseason, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it really is, right? So it's not like a huge elephant in the room. Everybody who knows anything about the NFL is like, yeah, the Giants need a quarterback.
Yeah. It's not the elephant, it's the circus, basically. It's everything.
Well, the thing that I think might get a little under talked about is that, we could sit here and argue over Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, Matt Stafford, Ryan Fitzpatrick. It doesn't matter. What's really interesting is that there is no quarterback signed to the roster. Zero. None. There is no quarterback on this roster.
We're just running the Wildcat next year, Grump. That's all we're doing.
Well, I mean, it just... So we'll just launch right into it, right? So right there, right off the bat, this is a dire situation. This is like the alarm bells are ringing. Like, it's not just the Giants need a franchise quarterback. It's not just the Giants really need a really good quarterback. They need someone to play the position. I mean, like that we might laugh, but that's sort of the role of the third quarterback on the roster, whether that be a practice squad guy or not. That's someone to play the position, and we've had to dip into that person with Tommy DeVito in the past. Like, you can get to the point where you need someone who can just play the position. They need that guy. They need the backup guy. They need the present guy. I mean, they need everything here.
Well, let's start with Tommy DeVito because he's the only guy. He's a restricted free agent where the others were unrestricted, and they're truly free agents at this point. Let's start with him because he's an interesting case where usually you don't see as much of your third string quarterback as Giant fans and honestly Giant management and coaching staff have in the last 2 years. The third string quarterback is usually someone who half the time isn't even active. Half the time people don't even know who their third string quarterback is, to be honest. This is one that, besides being a local cult hero, is someone that, they brought in and they expected to groom to potentially be a backup. And he has had probably more snaps as a third string quarterback than anybody in the league has in the last several years. So, Grump, you've seen enough of him now. We've seen a lot of snaps with him, a lot of games. After 2 years of seeing where he is he someone still on your radar that we should continue investing in to potentially be a backup? I still think that if he ever was to become a starting quarterback in this league is a long, long, long way to go. And I don't personally think so, but as a capable backup, is this someone he's on the path to be one, or are you ready to say, I think I've seen enough, move on?
I would say if I'm just evaluating the talent, I think I've seen enough where I know he's never going to be a good backup. A capable backup, maybe. I think that person could probably still one day be a backup that moves the ball, runs an offense, maybe. But right now he's not, and I think it's off the table that he'll ever be a good one. Whether the Giants should do anything with that is sort of a separate conversation, though. So,
Hmm.
you know, I think the idea of grooming him to become anything should be off the Giants' plans. And the reason is actually quite simple. It has nothing to do with Tommy DeVito. If they're going to be grooming a quarterback, they need to be grooming their quarterback this year. I mean, like that's probably the longest answer here. Second of all, should the head coach be grooming a quarterback if he's got an entire team to run and he hasn't been doing a very good job of it? I mean, I think there's Giants answers for not wanting to groom Tommy DeVito anymore. I think there's Tommy DeVito reasons for not wanting to groom Tommy DeVito anymore. But there might be money reasons why he gets re-signed, and familiarity reasons why he ends up remaining as the third quarterback next year.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think it's at least possible, meaning he could be in a camp battle for that third spot and end up losing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let's talk about the money for a second because, Tommy DeVito, if he actually is to kind of go out and, ask for more money, his value is higher with the Giants, obviously, than any other team,
Yeah,
correct?
I would think so. The Giants are
Although,
in a weird spot, like you said, where they probably have the most popular third string quarterback in the league, mainly because most people couldn't name their third string quarterback.
yeah,
But
although keep in mind that, when the Knicks had Jeremy Lin, that when it went through Lin Sanity and everything, I was thinking the same thing. Like his value is being a Knick. I can't see, another team going overspending for a guy because his kind of cachet is being a Knick. And I was completely wrong. Houston made a poison pill contract offer, which the Knicks said, no thanks. A
well,
little different.
I don't. Yeah,
It's a little different, apples and oranges because Jeremy Lin was,
actually good.
well, he had that couple of weeks where he was just
He was
out of his
performing
mind.
at one point.
He was performing at one point, and also he kind of, you know, being Chinese, had a similar thing that Yao Ming did, where all of a sudden an international audience was following him. So it wasn't just like, okay, if you're in the New York tri-state area, you have a thing for Tommy DeVito. This was a little different, but Tommy DeVito right now, being the stereotypical New Jersey guy
Hmm.
makes his brand a little better being here.
Definitely,
Like,
that's
I mean,
definitely true.
if he's a Tennessee Titan, all of a sudden now it's like my cousin Vinny, and it seems a little silly.
Yeah.
I don't know if the value is there just from a marketable. And again, I don't know how much a third string quarterback brings for
Well, I
marketability,
was gonna
but
say the other thing too is that like your contracts just work differently in basketball
mhm,
too. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like the Knicks weren't going to be in a position to retain Jeremy Lin the same way because, if another team views him as one of the starting five, then you have so much
right.
more money to play with. That no team out there is going to be. The Giants are basically, if the Giants are like Tommy DeVito's our cheap option, let's just do that. Like they're not going to be outbid by anybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Like his time on the national stage was more bad than good. So, uh, I'm sure some teams out there think that they could probably do something with him if they had him, but they're not really going to be tripping over themselves. If he's a
It,
hassle to get, then they're not going to get him.
what's interesting? I wonder if you polled fans from around the country, for not GMs or even media, but just fans. What do you think of Tommy DeVito? Do they view him as, is the brand and the image overwhelming? Or, oh, that guy's cool, man. He's a New Yorker. He's a New Jersey guy, as opposed to he kind of sucked when he played. I'm very curious because it seems like, the packaging of him and the image was so solid and strong that I wonder if people actually start, or they're just like, oh, that team sucks anyway. He's playing in garbage time and who
Well,
cares?
you mean nationally or this area?
Nationally, like if you ask a Seattle Seahawk fan, what is your impression of Tommy DeVito? Do you think bad job at quarterback is the first or second thing they think of?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
I think both of those people exist. Everything you said, I think both of those people exist. There's somebody who loves him for the fun that he brings, right? Like I think
Mhm.
in this area you can find the Giants fan that's like, it was the most fun we've had in the last 5 years. You know what I mean? And I think you can find, and I mean like seriously, like a casual Giants fan that's just like,
Sure.
that was the only point in which I remember having fun lately.
Mhm.
And I think that there's also a version of that person somewhere else in the country. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But I definitely think there are plenty of just NFL football fans that are like annoyed by the amount of hype that he has because they see that he's not good. So you have this not good player with a bunch of hype. It's just annoying to deal with.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that both of those thoughts are both thought one and two for most NFL fans. You know what I mean? It
Yep.
just depends on which one you ask.
Yep. Sounds fair.
Um, would you resign him? Like, or are you so done with him that you want another third quarterback to groom, or do you not care about the third quarterback? Like, where you land? Like how passionate are you about this Tommy DeVito conversation?
I think if they've decided he's a third string quarterback at best, I think you bring him back to camp. And if you want to bring another guy in off the street to compete with him, great. And whoever wins wins. I don't think there's any. I think at this point now, like I said, we've seen him in game action far more than we ever thought we would. So we probably have a better analysis of him and set of data points that we would probably never would have had for our third string quarterback. If it was our second string, if he was legitimately battling to be the backup, I think I would move on. But I think if they assess that, he's probably a solid third string quarterback, and if we get in this situation again where our starter's out and then our backup gets hurt or is really really bad, to your point, he's been in the system now, it'd be his third year. Um, Fine. So I think if they've assessed that he's a third string guy, you bring him back and you have him compete.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think if that's where you land with him, then why not give him a shot to lose that third quarterback spot? It's not like he's expensive.
We're talking about a rounding error on the overall cap situation too with him.
Yeah, exactly. And but I just care so little about the, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's it is a different situation when you have Daniel Jones on the roster. That's a guy
Mhm.
who's been in the league for more than 5 years. He's been in the offense. He's had success in the offense already. Whatever his issues were with seeing the field or whatever, you work on that with that person or whatever. But like, Tommy DeVito, you're working on the fundamentals and seeing the game, and it's not the same. And you can spend time with him. And Daniel Jones only has to work on a few things. This year, you're probably bringing in a young quarterback where I want you to be attached to their hip.
Mhm.
So like I just don't care about grooming third string guy. So like I acknowledge that maybe there's not a third string guy they can get for as cheap. You know what I mean? So like maybe
Well,
Tommy DeVito is the best option just from a money state. Like and because you do have to spend less time with him, right? Like
yeah,
he
quite
knows
frankly,
the offense.
quite frankly, it's his third year. If you're still grooming a third year guy, you get
Well, I
rid of him.
mean grooming in terms of developing him,
Yeah.
kind
Hmm.
of getting him to get past the hump. But
Yeah.
like you have a quarterback two that you have to teach the offense to. You have a quarterback one you have to teach the offense to, and a quarterback three. I mean, I might want to re-sign him just because I don't have to teach him.
Well, let's talk about that for a second as we work our way up the ladder. Let's talk about Drew Lock for a second. Now he's unrestricted free agent, can go anywhere he wants to go. Are we, the two of us, officially out on bringing him back from what we saw? I mean, we saw an anomaly of a game that cost us
It's
the right to pick whoever we want to pick in this draft. I'm not
true.
guaranteeing anything, but he was fantastic in that game. But sandwich that around really from preseason on, every time we saw him, seeing a quarterback as bad as I looked when I played intramurals back in 35 years ago. So are we done with him, or for that consistency standpoint, do we want to bring him back just so it's one less thing we have to worry about?
If I'm
knowing
bringing, well, okay, what's up?
knowing full well that if we draft a quarterback, the heir apparent, that this number 2 quarterback probably gonna have to play a little bit in the beginning of the season, potentially.
Well, Drew Lock is quite a package to unwrap. Um, for starters, we're talking about him as quarterback 2, right?
Correct. But if we let's say we draft, fill in the blank of the name of the guy we draft,
Mm.
and this coaching staff is like probably needs another week or two to sit on the bench and get ready. So this quarterback 2 might be an interim quarterback 1 for a little bit.
Sure, and by year's end, Drew Lock was in fact quarterback 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's face it, when he started, he was quarterback 3.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
let's face it, when they made the decision to move on from
DeVito,
no, they when they
Jones.
made from Daniel Jones, who did they turn to?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Drew Lock was quarterback 2 on the depth chart, but when they moved on from Jones, they went to Tommy DeVito. They didn't go to Drew Lock.
Exactly.
And everything you said is correct. Drew Lock looked bad throughout all of preseason, through training camp. It was no surprise to me that they went to DeVito first. I mean, I guess it was surprising only because it seemed, I don't know. I'm not usually that right. You know what I mean?
It was surprising based on how much money they spent on Drew Lock. I mean, he didn't come in for the veteran minimum when they signed him.
It was just surprising that like I hadn't seen him do anything that looked anything remotely good.
Yeah.
Anything remotely, I mean, like just awful timing, awful accuracy. He got hurt too, which we are leaving out. He did get rocked in the preseason.
The biggest surprise for me, if anything, was the fact that they went back to Drew Lock after they. I commit might be a strong word now with Tommy DeVito. They went with Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito had a concussion and basically never came back.
That's true.
That was the biggest surprising thing of all of this. It was like, well, what are we doing? Are we really in tank mode or are we not? And that's some of the indecision maybe that when we talk about the coaches at some point this offseason is one of the biggest things we have to talk about what they did.
Well, I think for me the surprising part was that I saw him last pretty much in the preseason, Drew Lock. Mm-hmm. And by the time they pulled Jones and they put in DeVito instead, like, I guess my shock was like, oh my God, he really hasn't gotten any better.
Yeah.
Which was just like, we're used to seeing some bad football, whatever, but it was like, oh my God, this was like Waterboy levels of bad, like Little Giants shit. Like,
but we figured in 9 weeks from
I
the last time we saw him in preseason,
progress would happen.
Okay, he's picked up the offense.
Something.
He's built a rapport with receivers, and because again, this was not a
Tommy DeVito did it in a year.
Yeah, this wasn't a reflex decision to move on from Daniel Jones. We everybody, the two of us, everybody who watches and follows the Giants was like, there's this injury thing coming up soon, and they're going to make a move most likely. Right. So there had to be some preparation for this, whether it was in stealth when nobody knew about it or out in the open during, practice that wasn't covered by the media. But no, he didn't step up to, clearly be it.
So as far as Drew Lock, I'm not picking Drew Lock for any consistency with the system because I'm not convinced he ever picked up the system at all.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So if I'm keeping Drew Lock, it's because I think he maybe showed some comfort down the stretch there, and I think there's something I can work with because I'm Brian Dable, whatever. I'm closer to Drew Lock being quarterback 3, and I don't know what his market value is after this year. He's had such little success at the NFL level. The years of bad tape are starting to stack against his years of good tape. You know what I mean? Like, if his market value is truly in the trash heap, I wouldn't mind retaining him for quarterback 3 purposes. But when I look at this quarterback situation, and I'm viewing this as like, I do think that there's a lot of moves that they can make here, like just to allude at, because it feeds into this answer. I think there's some moves here that don't involve a young quarterback this year. that are on the table, though not necessarily what I would do. And in those scenarios in which you don't have a young quarterback on the roster, fine. You know what I mean? You want Drew
Yeah.
Lock on there, okay. But in any scenario in which there is a future franchise young quarterback on this roster, number two needs to be a veteran that is proven. I want to hear a name like Jacoby Brissett. I want someone who's been around. Fine, he's not going to wow you. Fine, he's not quarterback one, but he's going to learn a system. He's going to be a professional. He's going to get an offense together and organized, and he's going to throw some fucking passes. That's it. That's what I need. That I need a veteran presence. I'd like someone better than that, but that seems like an affordable, smart quarterback to kind of move to me.
I agree. Let's talk about the potential. Let's turn the page. I guess we've kind of made our, and Tim Boyle. I already wasted too much breath talking about Tim Boyle. So let's move on to 2025. And what do we do? There's a lot of options, like you said. There's let's break it down to three main buckets. I mean, there's bucket A, you just go out and you draft your guy. There's bucket B, you draft or you sign a stopgap to longer than stopgap guy. Or three, you make a trade to a guy that right now, as in this moment, you don't think would be available. So
Which bucket do you want to start with? We can.
well, let's start with bucket C. Let's start with the potential trades, because there's been a little noise in the last 10 days or so about one Matthew Stafford. And I want we have not talked about this, the two of us together. Um,
No, we haven't talked about this at all.
the concept of Matthew Stafford, A, the player Matthew Stafford, B, the contract Matthew Stafford, C, what are we actually doing by trading for a Matthew Stafford? Like, where do we perceive ourselves with drafting of him? So let's start with this. How do you feel about just trading for one, just in general, and then let's talk about Stafford to start with.
Trading for a quarterback?
Yeah.
Trading for a quarterback should help us win right now. We should maybe not necessarily like compete for a Super Bowl, but it gets you a winning culture. It gets you a chance to truly evaluate your roster. Because I mean, a quarterback is not just. It is unlike any other position in any other sport. It controls way too much of the game, and if the quarterback is awful, then you're not really able to see what your offense looks like. And the way the rules have changed in the last 20 years, if you can't view your offense and analyze your offense, it doesn't even matter what the defense does, because offense is just too important.
Mm-hmm.
So trading allows for a lot. The only downside with trading is that you have to give something up and then also pay a salary. So when you're trading for a quarterback, most of the time you're inheriting a very large contract. And I'm struggling now to think of who is possibly on the trading block that doesn't have a very large contract. So now it adds in an additional ripple that probably involves renegotiating contracts after the trade. So it's a lot of moving pieces, and it seems very difficult to pull off, but it allows for the most immediate results.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And again, I think besides Shane and Brian Dable wanting to kind of get immediate results, I think this whole organization just wants to get off the treadmill of being 2-9 every year or starting
right.
the season. They're not talking about championship or bust, but there is a lot of breathing room provided if you can be 4-4 after 2 months or so. And they may be looking at just, we need some stability, and we need something just to get us out of just complete mediocrity and not being able to compete. Just really quick with Matthew Stafford's contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Next year is a potential out after 2025, but the cap hit next year is 49 million, 2026 53 million. And he's an unrestricted free agent for 2027.
So here's the thing. Normally, I would say I'm looking at the contract too. Sorry, I'm not just like glancing away.
Mhm.
I see what you're saying. Normally, I would say what you do uh, is you trade for this guy, and then you sign him to an extension that slightly lowers this year. It really lowers next year, and then it spreads it out into the next year and the year after. But Matthew Stafford's going to be 37. So it's
Mhm.
really hard to add years without really just financially kicking the can down the road and paying it later when you're not getting a player anymore. Um, I think it's important that we talk about Matthew Stafford, the player, before we go too much further into the contracts because
Agreed.
worth is kind of important here.
Mhm.
I'm going to say that I'm going to predict that you're going to have a lower opinion of Matt Stafford than I am, but I'm going to predict also that that is because A, he went to Georgia, and B,
Well,
it's because, but you're going to have legitimate points, and people have had legitimate points against Matt Stafford for years. But one of the reasons is because he came out during an age of quarterbacks that we don't currently have. We simply don't. So he was always afterthought guy with big numbers. But now he's older and he is throwing at odd time slots, no look passes, leading mediocre teams. I mean, when you look at the Rams wide receiver core, are you really floored by Puka Nacua? Is Puka Nacua really good, or is Puka Nacua an average receiver, an above average NFL receiver that's in a well designed offense with the perfect quarterback at the helm for it? You know what I mean? I
I think
do
he's in.
wonder
I think.
these
I think
things.
he's in between the two. I think
Okay.
he's in between. He's not. He's not average, but I don't think he's
Well,
elite.
okay. I think where Puka Nacua shines is in some intangible things that are a little less wide receivery. Like I think he's incredibly tough. Dude,
Mhm.
dude takes hits like a madman. He throws his body around like a madman. He has tremendous value as a wide receiver in ways that other receivers don't. But I don't know that he's a route runner that just gets open that makes it easy on Matt Stafford. You know what I mean? This isn't Calvin Johnson out there that you can just heave in
No,
that direction anymore. Matt Stafford, I think, has stepped up to the plate. I think he is. I think he's currently a top 15 quarterback. Um, I think that the gap between him and the one behind him is probably fairly sizable. And I think he's one of the very few established veterans that's in the top area. Most of the guys that are in the top area that we're projecting are either mediocre veterans that are established or they're young talent and we have you know
mhm.
they're either superstar level or minimal sample size. Like who would you say are guys better than him? You can say Allen, you could say Mahomes, you can say Jackson. Then what? Dak?
I guess. Yeah.
Burrow probably, maybe.
But we're
I don't
also
even.
talking. We're talking about huge financial commitments with those guys too,
Of
so they're
course.
unattractive. Yeah.
Who else? You're not putting Penix above him, right? Jordan
No.
Love, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not putting Goff above him. I don't know about you, but I'm not.
I am not putting Goff above him.
Hurts, different value. I'm
Different.
not a better thrower of the ball, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
but just a more efficient quarterback who gets the job done more. I would put Hurts above him.
Okay. I see. I wouldn't. I. I mean, if we're ranking quarterbacks, I'm kind of trying to value what they
But
can do for me, and I think he does more
y-
for me. But I get what you're saying.
yeah, but Hurts also gets a little bit of an asterisk because that's a perfect offense for him. If I took him out of that offense and put him somewhere else, you know, he may be dropping several notches because he's just a square peg in a round hole, maybe.
Yeah, could be.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm not putting Tua above him. Like I think he's up there. I think he's way up there.
But I think him being way up there is also a product of the bar is kind of low once you get past the
Sure.
elite quarterbacks too.
Okay. So now we get what now that brings us to value.
Hmm.
In terms of value, does any of that matter? What you just said, which I absolutely agree with, the bar is lower, but does that matter? Because the cap's higher.
The cap is higher. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to justify. Well, I can't re-sign Saquon for $4 million, but I'm going to spend so much on a guy who's on the downside of his career. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like a very expensive bridge.
It sure does. Yeah.
And and again, you were probably expecting me to say, "Fuck that guy, he's from Georgia," and I'm not
No,
going to say
no,
that.
no, no.
You
I
know,
didn't expect
no,
that.
no, no.
I
You
just
know,
thought I would have a higher opinion of him than you. That's it.
um,
And I
my
think I
opinion,
do, but not by much.
not by much. I respect him as a quarterback. I respect him winning the championship and all that. Um, I just don't think it's the. If he was a few years younger, maybe something we could say. Okay, we're going to have this guy for the next 4 years. Again, the price probably goes up and everything, but he's 37,
Mm-hmm.
38.
He's going to be 37 this year.
Okay, so quarterbacks, they drop in efficiency and everything pretty quickly when they get older. I mean, don't use guys like even Aaron Rodgers before this year as the rule. They're the exception
Mm-hmm.
of guys that get super old and still playing at a very high level, if not elite level. So, what are you really getting for your buck? You're going to get, hopefully one good year, and then all of a sudden a decline starts, and that money thing is still there, and you missed a window to get a young guy that's cheaper. I'm going to go into my decision making about drafting versus trading in a little bit when we talk about the draft, but I just don't see it. Doesn't make any sense to me to get a guy like Stafford, and not him personally, but just someone in his position, somebody that's up in age, big, big number, big cap number. I, I don't know. I think I'm passing.
I think it can make sense. I just think that too many things would have to align that I don't think are going to align. But I think that I think that he's probably going to play well this year, this upcoming year. I think he's going to play well the next year as well. And then I think he either calls it quits or um, plays down the year after that. So I think he's 3 years removed from his end. However, that can all change just by playing in New York. I mean, like, I mean that very simply. Like, if the Giants were to make this move, and they don't put the pieces in around him to support him properly, he could have the drop off immediately. So like he's at that tender, delicate age where like the surroundings are gonna dictate the lifespan. You know what I mean? So like I said, like I can see how this would work. I just don't think it does because I think it also involves I don't know what you're gonna give up. I don't. It's not worth the number 3 overall pick. So let's start there. It's not worth a first round pick. A guy at that age with you have to when you have these trade talks, you have the conversation about the impending contract as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think this is Brian Burns, and I think that Joe Shane has shown that he is not a stupid trader. So I don't even know if this is going to cost a second round pick. It may cost a future second round pick, like a
Mm-hmm.
2026 second round pick. And now we're talking, man, because that's not really much. Now we're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about much. Um, so I can see how this could work. Like really honestly. Yeah. Yes, the number's high. I do think that if you can work out a deal with an extension, you can make the numbers smaller. And yes, you're adding a year, but now it comes to you and what you're able to do to build around him. You know what I mean? Like you're taking the number off of this year as much as you can, I'm sure. I'm sure you tell him this too. Like, listen, we convert this to a bonus, we kick this down the road to next year, blah 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 blah. You want to come out here and die in your first year, or you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, this is what we're going to use this money for. So I, I think it could work. I think this is definitely a rumor that's worth exploring. I think it's something the Giants should explore. I don't think it's going to happen. I just
I
don't
think the,
see it.
I think the Giants should explore every avenue, every single
But what
one.
I mean
And
is, I think there's a
yeah.
legitimate pathway there. This isn't just
Mhm.
on the table because everything's on the table. I think it's on the table for good reason.
So what would you think the expectations would be if we were to get Stafford? Like, what would your expectations be for this team, and what do you think the fan base and media's expectation would be?
Win fucking games. I don't know. I don't know that you'll get any more consensus answer than that if you were to poll 10,000 Giants fans, you'll get some people saying playoffs are busts. You'll see some people saying the Giants have to win a Super Bowl for Joe Shane to keep his job. You'll see guys saying, I don't care if it's 5 wins, I want it to be fun. But the one constant that you'll find is that the expectation will be that it won't be an embarrassment. They will win games, they will be in games, they will be in the hunt, which is, I think, the main thing. Like, the Giants could lose 15 games and they could be in all 15 of them, but lose 15 games, and Giants fans will think that this, you're not in it anymore as a fan. So it's not just being tight in games, it's winning games, it's winning early enough in the year where, come December, teams are like, fuck, we got to play the Giants. Like, they're not one of the 4-12 teams. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's what Giants fans want. That's what the expectation will be. You bring in somebody like Matt Stafford with that number, with that pedigree, with that amount of experience, you expect to win fucking games.
So you don't think the expectations are even higher? Like, well, this team should make the playoffs now.
Well, you're asking me in a vacuum. You know what I mean? So in my head, I'm picturing Matt Stafford throwing to Malik Neighbors, and there's no Darius Slayton across from him, and there's 1 year left of Wan'Dale Robinson. So there's a lot of other things in there. If the Giants do something amazing with the 3rd overall pick and get Abdul Carter, and then they get a big dick wide receiver or something like that, then yes, you might hear the expectations more unanimously push for the playoffs or something like that. But in a vacuum, just Stafford, I think the expectation is that they will win games.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair, because I'm afraid of, if they get a guy like, because Stafford at this point to me really is more of a name than he is of a reliable commodity to produce.
Sure.
Again, because of the age, but Stafford, Super Bowl winner, number 1 pick. I mean, it's funny how people just like 15 years later think he was the number 1 pick. That means something today. I'm trying to. I've been doing this now for ever since this kind of rumor broke out. Was weighing in my head how much of a over irrational expectation there would be and pressure put on. Like, if you trade for Stafford, does that put more pressure on Shane to be a playoff team? That's, forget even winning. I mean, if we go from, what do we win, 4 games to 7-10, does that alleviate pressure, or does that add more pressure that having him means we need to do better? Is the pressure on these guys more, or as opposed to drafting Cam Ward, for example,
Oh,
where
yeah. I see what you're saying. Well, I mean, it
yeah,
depends on what they do with their pick, right? Like, I'm, I don't want to, look too far into the future of this episode, but if
right?
they also spend the 3rd overall pick on Shadur Sanders, I mean, that shit matters. You know what I mean? Like, you could double dip at the quarterback position, which we're going to talk about.
That was
But
actually
like,
my next. That was my next question.
okay,
Actually, go ahead.
yeah. So, I mean, like, in that scenario, they're using a huge premium asset at a position where the guy's not playing. So that's good. That a Giants fan's not. They'll be annoyed if they are 7-10 and they're out of the playoffs, but they're not stupid. They're gonna understand that Matt Stafford is there to guide Shadur Sanders, and he's going to teach him the ways, and he's going to win games at and we could make the playoffs.
Made us competitive first.
Right. And they'll know that in the upcoming year they'll have Matt Stafford again, potentially with a 1st round pick for him to throw to, or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Like, or maybe by then I guess Shadur Sanders is playing. I don't know, but if they're, if that's the only like move at quarterback, that's like the only major move where they don't invest a premium asset or big money, then I would say that they're in deep shit if that's the only move they make and they don't make the playoffs, right?
Yeah,
I
agree.
think they're done.
Because that was, like I said, that was my next question is, there is a potential also that we trade for a Stafford or a Stafford-esque quarterback and still make that quarterback move at 3, because again, general managers are looking at what's the long-term what is the overall value of the pick and how long they're going to last. And again, if he's not getting any younger,
Mhm.
If you're making this trade, okay, we just kicking the can of quarterback problem to 2020, you know, 7 or even potentially 2026 where we may not. Okay, he makes us competitive. We win 7 games or 8 games. That means, the option for drafting the quarterback, you know, the risk goes up a little bit, or the expected potential of success goes down with every pick you take. So this is as close as you're going to get to the highest potential for a return for a quarterback.
Yeah.
So yeah, I if we somehow make a trade in the next, week, 2 months before the draft, that does not mean that we're done with getting quarterbacks. And I would
Oh, yeah.
not at all. And I think that's still very possible. And again, the way the NFL worked for the first 100 years of this, oh, not 100 years of this league, the first 90 years of this league was if you drafted a quarterback that, most likely he was sitting for some point anyway before the season started. It was extremely rare for guys right out of the chute to start on day one.
I um I think that there's I I don't know. There's one other caveat here in that if you trade for a quarterback, you're getting the most immediate fix, right?
Hmm.
Suddenly that number 3 pick is very much in play to be traded down, and we're not talking about that. And the reason I think that's important is that a lot of the understanding is that like if you win now, your draft pick is worse later, right? But if you
Hmm.
trade down, and again, this is assuming there's a trade partner, but I'm sure somebody wants Travis Hunter. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Hmm.
not too worried about someone giving
I
up
can I can guarantee you somebody wants Cam Ward, somebody wants Travis Hunter, someone wants Shedeur Sanders. I can guarantee it.
enough to give up a 2026 first.
I
Which if
agree.
they're giving up their 2026 first for Travis Hunter, it's a good chance that they're not going to be good right away. And
Depends on the
then
team.
of course, yeah, it depends on the team. And I guess you factor the team's roster into who your trade partner is. But if it's someone that's going to be bad, like now you have 2 first round picks next year, you can move up. You can move up in next year's draft class to get a quarterback. So I guess if you swing those 2 moves, trading for Matt Stafford, or whatever, and trading down number 3, maybe you survive not making the playoffs. If you go like, let's just say you go 9-8. Is that what it is now? 9-8.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you go 9-8, but you don't make it. So you have a winning record. You don't make
It,
it essentially by the wild card, but you were in the hunt all year. But next year you have 2 first round picks. I don't know. Maybe you survive.
first of all, if you're jumping up what 4 or 5 games over this year, you're surviving. Case
You
closed.
think so? Even after
Absolutely.
trading for? I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're not trading for 24-year-old Matt Stafford. We're trading for a stopgap Matt
Hmm.
Stafford. I mean, Stafford's not being brought in as the final piece to win a Super Bowl. He's brought in to make us competitive and to really to bridge. It's expensive bridge, but it is to bridge.
Yeah.
So I think that so much has to happen, for this team to be, to jump. 5 games is a pretty big jump. And again, it's not something like with Washington, for example. It's had this young, quarterback came in and just was completely, you know, set the league on fire in the beginning. We know what we're getting with Matt Stafford, or maybe we don't. Maybe we see, if anything, a guy who's unlike what's his name in Washington, who got better and better each week. A guy who potentially getting worse and worse because he's getting older.
Maybe. Well, since we're talking about expensive, should we talk about free agent choices?
Sure.
I, there are a ton of names being thrown around, and I think they're all different categories of quarterback, right?
Hmm.
Um, One that I hear a lot is Sam Darnold. Um, I think there's a chance he stays in Minnesota, but whether he does or he doesn't, I think he's probably the biggest name on the market, right?
I would think so.
Is that just me saying that, like, is he off the table for you?
I think he's off the table for us. I think because I don't know if he'd want to come here.
That's
to be
fair.
to
Yeah.
very very honest. Again, don't have the last thing you saw, become, oh, Sam Darnold overrated all year. It was a, I like to look at the 14 or 15 games he played as opposed to the good ones, as opposed to the two bad ones. And it just so happens the two bad ones were late in the year, but he was pretty damn good.
Hmm.
And, he was up there for MVP consideration for, you know, quite a bit earlier on in the season. Um, I don't know why he'd want to come to this team, to be very honest. And again, I think he's going to command quite a bit of money. I mean, I think he's going to command at least as much as what's his name got in Tampa Bay, and
Baker Mayfield,
yeah, what Mayfield got. Uh,
which
do
I
we
think
want
is less than what Stafford is making currently.
to? Yeah, but I guess the question is, what kind of does this guy get, like a 4 or 5 year contract with somebody? Is somebody going to spend the big money for, like, the longness of the contract as much as the average annual? I think
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Do you think he's seeking that?
I would, sure, why not? I mean,
I would.
he is never going to be in this position, I think, to make more money than he is at this moment right now.
Yeah.
Because even if he signs a 3 year deal somewhere, in 3 years, is he going to play as well as he did for the majority of this year for the next 3 years? I don't know. Maybe, but maybe not. And if he's kind of takes a step back, and this was a just an anomaly year where he was really good in an ideal situation, that money may never come again. So I think he's going to try to juice this one as much as he can.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're in a position to be juiced at quarterbacking for
We're not juicers.
we're not juicers. Yeah, and I he's not as much of a guaranteed commodity to me to make that risk.
What about him, the player? Forget the money.
I mean, if this was baseball and there was no cap worries to worry about, would I try to get him? Sure.
Okay.
I would, I'd put an offer in, of course, but this is it's a cap league. It's a big, big, big thing.
No,
I mean,
I'm just
I
curious
I think
because, like, I mean, this is a polarizing guy. I mean, you just went on a thing about, you're choosing to look at the 15, 16 games over the
yeah,
two bad ones, and that's fine. But you're still looking at one season in a vacuum, and a lot of fans, not myself, but a lot of fans are looking at his whole NFL career,
hmm
and putting that up against the 1 year that he looked good. And
yeah,
I would say that has more to do with experience and system than it does anything else. I mean, the
yeah,
Minnesota Vikings were already a playoff team before he got there. The New York Jets were a disaster. They're still a disaster. The Carolina Panthers were a disaster. They're still a disaster. So, I mean, I'm not really going to hold all of that against him. Did he have some embarrassing moments? Sure. Am I in love with him as a quarterback? No. I think that he's fine. If he got what Baker Mayfield got, then we're talking about $33 million a year. Um, I think I could stomach that. I don't know how much more than that I would want.
I just don't see him being my cornerstone for the next 7, 8 years. I guess even if I was just me looking at him as like, okay, this would be a good guy for the next couple of years, but I don't. I still see him as a bridge to something else.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm sure there is a team out there. Now, Minnesota's a little different because he's in the system already and it's working, and they also have JJ McCarthy, percolating on the bench too.
Right.
I mean, we've seen
They
teams
also have Daniel Jones percolating on the bench.
that's that's a percolation like me on a Sunday morning after a couple cups of coffee. But um, we have seen teams in relatively recent times just, take a draft pick and stash him on the bench until they are ready for him.
Right.
So that can happen. Um,
I've also heard. What about Russell Wilson in this same vein as Sam Darnold?
yeah. Um, he'd be cheaper.
You think so? Yeah. Yeah,
Sure.
probably.
I think he'd be cheaper. I think he might be a little bit of a better fit, I think, because, you know, dealing with a offensive line that's kind of and he can kind of he can move around a little bit and maybe cover up some things potentially. I don't know. Again, he's clearly another stopgap guy to get you through a year or two.
Hmm.
Um, it's also I just the last couple of coaches, they're gonna one and done him and move on. That kind of worries me a little bit.
About him, the person.
I don't know if it's the person or just what they've seen on the field that they're kind of like,
Well, I mean, he has that reputation of like not really having a locker room behind him. I mean, that
that
whole
too.
thing with like having an office, you know what I mean, and all this other
Yeah.
nonsense. I don't know. I don't know if that worries me. I mean, I guess I think it does. I'm lying. It does. And the reason why is because the team so desperately needs more than talent. It needs a culture shock.
Yeah.
And if there's any inkling of that kind of douchebaggery,
Yeah.
and
Darnold
I mean,
Darnold seems
we're
very vanilla, very like, okay, just go
yeah.
and do your job for a year and
If
just,
yeah, if Russell Wilson's not even in the fucking locker room when guys got to text his secretary to see if they can schedule
yeah.
time to talk to him, then that's not needed. But
And also
also, I
and
mean,
also
those
and,
rumors go back to Seattle, right? Like, I don't know if he's
mhm.
still like that.
And let's go back to again, let's go back to Stafford too. Stafford's never been that guy either. He's been
No,
does his job and, seems like a pretty good guy,
seems like a decent leader. Yeah.
Oh, sure, sure, sure. So, you're right. Is we're trying to make it easier for this coaching staff and this organization to develop an identity and develop a culture. And there's a lot of headwinds right now between them playing in New York, the media, the losing baggage that's there already. Um, and also, I think a guy like Malik Neighbors could really use a professional. And again, a guy
Yes.
like Stafford is a professional. I think Sam Darnold is a professional. Your points about Russell Wilson are definitely taken. Now, that may go against my, draft a quarterback guy because you're going to have a young guy coming in. But if you're going to go the route of the bridge, I want that bridge to optimize. We want to optimize that bridge as well as we can. And that means on the field and off the field.
Um, should we talk a little bit about the draft? I don't want to get into like I watched film on this guy and this, that, and the other thing, but
No, I just want to talk about the draft just as a concept.
okay, yeah, yeah, that's what I was hoping you were gonna say. Yeah.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth about, I think we're already with a fine tooth comb worrying about these quarterbacks, are these guys future franchise guys, either of them,
Hmm.
or even, someone like a little down, like in the second tier of quarterback. And, again, if we're just going to talk about Cam Ward and Shador Sanders, you know, they're almost unanimously on everybody's big boards as being top 3 to top 5 guys. Now, I mentioned uh, bars before, and some bars are higher and lower in different things. And, maybe the bar is a little lower with these two guys and other ones, but still, you know, we need a quarterback. We need someone, and preferably someone for the next 5 to 7 years is going to be our quarterback. You know, having a franchise Hall of Fame guy would be fantastic, but we don't need a a franchise can't miss quarterback to be successful in this league. Look back at the last, Jalen Hurts is not a can't miss quarterback. Look at the last several quarterbacks have won championships, and they're not maybe not necessarily. You need somebody who's going to be good, and I think both of these guys are going to be good. So one of my favorite sayings is always, "Don't let perfect be the enemy of the very, very good." So I think just because these guys don't have the pedigree, the background, the numbers, all that stuff to say, wow, there's an Andrew Luck coming out this year. You have to weigh everything. And to me, getting the guy that you want, we're gonna have 4 months to look and decide who you want, and relative cost control for those 4 years means a lot in this league too. Because we're talking about Stafford, we're talking the 30 something million. We're talking about maybe if we sign Sam Darnold, we're talking 30 something million. We're drafting one of these guys. We're talking the rookie contract for 5 years. And that allows you to a lot of roster building, which may not be available, and not worrying about getting your quarterback. Because even if you draft, even if you sign Darnold or you trade for Stafford, we mentioned this for the whole part of this show. In the back of your mind's always going to be, well, we need that guy at the other end of the bridge. Well, this is your guy going forward. So I am be careful of the, well, these guys don't grade as high as other ones, or I'm not overly in love with either one of them. Let this process play out for the next 4 months before you completely dismiss it. I'm getting more and more warming up to drafting someone. I haven't decided who I'd take yet. Again, I'm going to be relying on you a lot for your analysis and your input, along with the other guys that we follow and share information with. But I'm warming more and more up to my option would be to draft, because again, there's just as much of a chance that I think that Stafford could hit that age wall and really quickly, as much as one of these two guys that we draft completely completely bust out and are never a nothing.
Yeah,
That's
so
my
I
thought.
mean, I also highlighted a pathway in which you sign a Jacoby Brissett, because you need a quarterback too anyway, and maybe he's quarterback one for this year. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Maybe it's not sexy, maybe whatever, but you draft Shadur Sanders, you draft Cam Ward, and you know they're the future. You just you shield them from the criticism for a while. Let them be the hope. Let them learn. Let them get better.
This is not the same situation as Atlanta last year, where they spent a ton of money in free agency and then drafted a quarterback. Like,
right.
what are you doing? This is, if we're making a move, we are not spending money for our next guy and then all of a sudden drafting another one. We are, whatever move we make, trade, free agency, whatever, that's a stopgap guy. It's a different situation in Atlanta.
So I mean, it worries me a little bit that Shadur Sanders is getting some second round grades. I'm not going to act like it doesn't worry me at all. Um, but ultimately, when it comes to Brian Dable picking quarterbacks, I mean, I'm not worried about what their starting point is. I'm worried about what he thinks their ceiling is. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
I don't need them to be Jaden Daniels. I don't need them to be immediately good. Me, the fan. The Giants, I don't know. I don't know what John Mara needs. I don't know what Brian Dable and Joe Shane need in order to, keep their jobs. Me, the fan, I don't need either of these two quarterbacks this year. I mean, I don't need a rookie quarterback ever to be lights out, but these guys come in with a complete pass for not being very good in their first year. And I think everyone agrees with that. I think Mel Kiper agrees with that. You know what I mean? Everyone would say the same thing. Like, you always give a rookie quarterback time, but these guys, one guy is a walk on at Incarnate Ward, the other guy is not getting first round grades. So, I'm going to trust Brian Dable's ability to evaluate and work with quarterbacks. And if he thinks his ceiling is high, I mean, he was right with Josh Allen when I was wrong. So I guess I'll flip this question to you. And
Mm-hmm.
what about outside of the two guys, though? Like, what happens if it's Jackson Dart or Kyle McCord or Jalen Milrow or, Will Howard? Will Howard?
Will
Ryan
Howard.
Howard? Will Howard.
Will
Will
Howard,
Howard.
right?
Yeah, it's Will Howard.
Well,
Like,
again,
where does it sit with you, the fan? Like, I don't expect you to know anything about the ins and outs of their games or anything,
well,
but
I think it's exactly what you just said. If we trust Brian Dable's, evaluation of quarterbacks, and they don't like, because you have to put value in for the pick as just as much as the guy itself. If they don't think that, if he evaluates Shador Sanders as a second round pick, for example, and you know he doesn't think he's worthy of a first round pick, he doesn't take him, but he takes him in the second round, then that's fine.
well,
So
yeah.
yeah, so I look at it, if they like one of these, if they decide that the value's not there for that first pick, but one of those guys that you mentioned, the Milrose or something, is available, like first pick in the second round, and they take him, I'm gonna be fine with it,
Okay.
honestly.
Yeah. That's interesting because I think it's an interesting question because I do think there is some split among Giants fans there. I think they're out. If you can't get these two, then just move on.
Yeah, I mean, I have a different opinion about coaches and general managers. I think a lot of people do, because a lot of people, when they're out on somebody, they don't care what they do. It's a horrible. Everything they do is bad,
That's true.
and it's a mistake, and it's wrong. To me, until you're no longer the general manager, you're the general manager. Until you're no longer the coach, you're the coach. And we brought in this regime to do a lot of it was to do this very thing, was to get the next quarterback. So this is your opportunity. And they have not had their opportunity yet since they've been here to pick their quarterback. And now they're finally, I don't care if Evan Neal busted. Offensive lineman's one thing. I don't care if Kayvon Thibodeau is not the elite guy that, where he was drafted at. He's an edge guy. This is quarterback. They have not picked a quarterback yet. They've not had the opportunity. This is going to be their one. So hit and miss or all these other things is, you can evaluate, but this is different. This is quarterback. So let them do their job. And I'm going with the Josh Allen thing is something that, like, my guidepost for how these guys evaluate quarterbacks is him, and did a pretty good job.
One last thing. I know we're running long, so I don't want to linger on this too much, but I meant to ask this earlier. We were talking about Stafford and trades. I was like, when we're done talking about Stafford, I'll name this guy, and then we moved on. Would you trade for Brock Purdy? Brock Purdy is in the final year of his initial contract. He is due $5 million. So if you trade for him, you're going to need to extend him. Well, I mean, you don't need to, but you'll probably need to extend him. But he's going to be worth less than a Matt Stafford. I'm sure he wants money. I don't really know how great he is. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Just a thought. Just given his contract situation, it's at least worth discussing, no?
I think it's worth discussing. I get the sense with the 49ers that they're not all in with Brock. I think if they were all in with Brock Purdy, they would have signed him already, right?
I agree with that.
Same thing. So there's still some question about him. The question is, what is the... And it probably wouldn't be that expensive to trade, really, too.
That's
right?
what I'm saying. Like, that wouldn't stop you from drafting anybody.
No. And if he plays... Well, I guess the question also is, how effective is Brock Purdy without having,
a great offensive line and a really creative offensive scheme and
all this talent around him.
Yeah.
You're not going to have, not going to have the running back and the receivers and the tight end, all this stuff that San Francisco has that makes, his job a lot easier than other quarterbacks have.
But he's younger. But he's younger and he's still a bridge and he's cheaper. And he could be pretty good.
Oh, you're saying trade for him for just worry about the 1 year, and then if he's good, you resign him. If not, you draft anyway.
No, I think you could trade for him. I think you could extend him. Because in my eyes, if you trade for him and then you draft someone, he's gonna want out anyway, right? But you could draft someone and
not necessarily. I mean, he's going to be your starter on week 1. If
Correct.
You trade for him and you also
he's going to want out quickly, right? So like, he's not going to want to be here for 4 years if you're drafting Shedeur Sanders with the 3rd pick. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, we have the situation right now with JJ McCarthy.
I guess so.
It's just like there's.
But that happened inorganically. Sam Darnold was not expected to, earn a huge contract this offseason.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think
Brock Purdy's already waiting for that payday.
Right.
I think
but I think you're kind of playing your way into the big contract, I think. And let's put it this way: if you play really well, the Giants have a decision to make.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Brock Purdy will be fine. If he plays well, there'll be 10 other teams that want.
You're making my point for me. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You trade for him now, he probably won't want to extend for 5 years. He's probably going to want to extend for maybe 1 year so he can hit the open market and then really, you know, earn his worth. So you can probably extend him for short, 1 year, 2 year, especially since he knows if you're drafting somebody in the first round, I'm not here for very long anyway. I'm here for a good time, not a long time, and I'll make a bunch of money on the open market when I do well here. I'm just thinking like maybe that's possible. Maybe that's
All
something.
things all things equal, and obviously salary is part that makes it unequal. Would you rather have Brock Purdy, Shador Sanders, or Cam Ward for the next 5 years?
The next 5 years, Cam Ward.
Mhm. Of those three, okay.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
I
Um.
I think there's questions with Brock Purdy for sure.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we were just talking about what's his name with Philly. It's the same question. Also, that's a system.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's a system on steroids more because you have such great talent around it and great coaching around it.
But he's cheap. He's not expensive. Trading for him, you inherit $5 million.
Yeah, and he's
It's
unrestricted after for next year. So
yeah.
you don't have to extend him,
You
right?
don't have to.
You
You
just play him.
probably want to. I mean, me personally, to make him happy, maybe I give him extra money this year, and I get the security of having him
I
under contract next
well,
year. Because let's say it goes Cam Ward, then Shador Sanders 1-2, and you don't like any of the other quarterbacks. So now you're like, oh, you can't draft anybody now. But I could trade down and I can get another first round pick next year. And now I have the true bridge where I have another year of Brock Purdy and I can draft my guy next year. You know what I mean?
you know something.
I probably would.
If I'm Brock Purdy, I don't think I want an extension. I'm like, I'll play it out this year and we'll let the chips fall where they may.
With the Giants?
Yeah, if I play 20. If I get traded to the Giants in 2025.
Well, so here's why I say he might want a 1-2 year extension. If he
Okay,
plays out this year, the last year of his contract with the 49ers, it's
right,
probably I mean, probably. It is almost definitely the highest his worth will ever be because it's a system he's comfortable in and it's a very talented team with a really good coach that has expectations to win
right,
now.
right.
So that's probably the best film he's going to put out there. Anywhere else, he's going to have to learn a new system. And going to the Giants, he's going to a worse team. I mean, it's just
Mm-hmm.
that flat out. So if that's going to be his contract year film, is him getting beat up in New York, maybe he wants 2 years. You know what I mean? He can't help the fact that he's being traded, but he might want the extension to, you know, wait for things to click a little bit better, make his market time hit at a more convenient time. I
Yeah,
don't
but you know
know.
something.
Maybe.
Yeah, but let's say though
Or
he's
maybe he
kind
just
of.
wants out.
But let's say he's meh, and all of a sudden the guy you drafted, this Cam Ward starts in week 5, and all of a sudden he starts from week 5 to week 13, and then in the next year he's sitting for another year. His market value tumbles to nothing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think I think almost every player wants to hit open market as fast as they can, especially a guy like this where there really is a differing of opinion of just how good is he really
Oh, I
on his
mean,
own.
everyone among
Everyone,
him, the Niners fans, no one really
sure,
has a clear vision of his worth.
yeah, and is he worth? I mean, I don't think he's going to be worth. I don't think he's a quarterback even with the Niners. He's going to get a contract that's like top 5 in the league, but
No,
he's still going to get his
is due.
40
Yeah.
40 to 50 million probably.
What do you think trading for him costs?
Um, Not much. I don't think
I would
because
agree.
because again, I don't think the 49ers are sure what they want to do with him yet. And maybe it's just bird in hands better than two in the bush.
Could
And it's
you
just
even
like
see a player for player swap with him? I think I might see that more than a pick.
uh Thibodeau.
I was going to say Bobby Okereke.
Oh, because again, what Thibodeau's getting into at his 4th year,
Mm-hmm.
so it's almost the contracts almost line up for.
Yeah, I see what you're doing. I was going with, better player probably, but older. with a higher amount on his contract. I don't even know if San Francisco really needs a linebacker. You know what I mean? Might be kind of silly, but
Mm.
you know what I mean. He's signed through 2026, so you're getting him this year and next year. Same
Yeah,
difference.
yeah. I think it's something where the risk is kind of like similar risks, and I think Well, let me ask you a question. Would you do that trade?
Trade away. I mean, I would get rid of Bobby Okereke for a
Would you get rid
quarterback.
of? Would you get rid of Thibodeau for him?
No,
No.
I don't think so. I know Thibodeau was like underperforming to Giant standards in terms of sacks and pressures and all that other stuff, and I'm certainly going to criticize him for that. But as an all-around edge defender, he's not a bad player.
I think he's. I think he overachieves relative to the criticism that he gets.
Yes,
I think people act like he is Evan Neal on the defensive side of the ball, and he is not that.
correct.
Yeah.
We're over an hour here, so I think we've wrapped on quarterback. I didn't mean to bring it back to Brock Purdy there at the end.
No, I think that's actually really interesting and out of the box thing that it's very. I mean, the 49ers have done out of the box decisions with their quarterbacks in the past,
Yeah,
so this would not be a shocking decision if they did it. I don't know what their break the glass plan would be if they did trade Purdy, but because they make the playoffs this year where they had a lot of injuries. They could be healthily back, a healthy team back to being a contender again.
and it's not like they have a lot of money, like
Yeah,
cap space. So I don't know that they're.
that's another consideration too. Can they even afford to give him a huge contract?
Well, can they afford to replace him
Yeah,
at $5 million a starting quarterback? I mean, you can't even sign. I mean, can you get Jacoby Brissett for that? I don't even know.
I probably not.
So yeah, I'm not sure that it's even on the table. As much as we're talking about this.
Well, unless they draft one.
Suppose. I
Yeah,
mean, drafting pretty low, so or whatever high.
Brissett 1 year, $5 million, $7.8 million cap hit. So
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
cool.
So in the upcoming episode, we'll probably go over the rest of the offense. Whether that starts with skill position or offensive line, I'm not sure, but we're gonna aim to do that. Uh, of course, this show is on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So be
Yeah,
sure to subscribe at any or all of those places. And we will see you guys next time. Until then, go
go
Giants.
Giants.